I always thought my daughter's 10th birthday would be a quiet, happy memory. A day of laughter, barbecue, and friends. And it was, at least until 3 HOA goons decided to turn it into a constitutional crisis. We'd set everything up by noon. A rented bounce house stood like a proud, inflatable cathedral in the corner of the backyard. A few folding tables were covered with snacks, juice boxes, and gift bags. My wife was stringing up pink streamers along the fence, and I was working the smoker, tending to ribs like a surgeon. Kids ran wild across the lawn. Parents mingled, chatted, some holding paper plates stacked with brisket and coleslaw. The mood was golden. I built this house with my own hands 5 years ago, on land I bought precisely outside of the Cypress Haven HOA's jurisdiction. 4 acres of peace and privacy, surrounded by a proper perimeter fence and a long gravel driveway. I liked my neighbors just fine. Just not enough to let them dictate how many inches my grass should be or what color my damn mailbox could be. Cypress Haven sat on the other side of the creek, a maze of cloned McMansions run by people like Karen Ramsey, the kind of woman who'd issue a fine if your porch light bulb wasn't warm white enough. The music wasn't even that loud. Kids were dancing to some pop song I didn't recognize. A few dads cracked open beers, domestic, nothing wild. And then, at 3:07 sharp, I saw them. 3 figures in matching navy polos with the HOA crest stitched on the chest. Karen, her loyal bulldog of an inspector. Tyler, and a third I recognized only vaguely. Nancy, the silent type, the kind who always seemed to be observing, memorizing. They weren't on the sidewalk. They were at my gate. Then, without a word, they opened the latch and walked straight in like they owned the place. My wife caught my eye mid-streamer and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I set down my tongs, wiped my hands, and walked calmly toward them, smiling politely the way someone does when they're hoping not to deck someone in front of children. Karen led the charge, shoulders tight, clipboard in hand. She didn't even greet me. "Daniel Brooks," she said, as if announcing the opening statement at a trial, "you are in violation of noise regulations and Community Code 12.4. We're requesting that you cease this gathering immediately." I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "You heard me," she snapped. "This event is disrupting the peace of Cypress Haven. We've received multiple complaints." I gestured behind her. "This isn't Cypress Haven." "It doesn't matter," she said, raising her chin like she was trying to assert dominance over someone a foot taller. "We can hear the noise from within our community boundary. That makes it our concern." Tyler, arms crossed like a hired goon, added, "And the HOA empowers us to act when community standards are breached." "I'm not in your community," I said, my voice still steady. "This is private property, not under HOA. You have zero authority here." Karen's smile tightened into something resembling a sneer. "This property borders ours. That means you should respect the same rules of civility." I nodded slowly. "That's an interesting theory, Karen." She started toward the bounce house, eyes scanning for something to sight. Tyler moved to follow her. That's when I stepped away. I walked back inside the house, not fast, not panicked, just calm, controlled. I headed to the gun cabinet, entered the code, and pulled out my Mossberg. I didn't load it. I didn't chamber anything. I didn't even point it. I just walked back outside with it held loosely in my hands, angled toward the ground. Now listen, I wasn't trying to scare anyone. But sometimes, people like Karen only understand boundaries when they're clearly marked. And nothing defines a boundary quite like a shotgun held by a former police officer on his own goddamn land. The moment they saw me, the mood shifted. Karen's face drained of color. Tyler stepped back so quickly he tripped over a garden hose. Nancy looked like she might vomit. Kids were watching now, confused. My wife hurried over to herd them toward the bounce house. "I suggest," I said clearly, firmly, "that you turn around, walk back out the gate you weren't invited through, and don't come onto my property again unless I send you a written invitation. You are trespassing. I'm asking you, politely, to leave." Karen's voice cracked. "You're threatening us with a gun." "No, ma'am. I'm standing on my property, holding an unloaded firearm legally registered in my name, not pointed at anyone. You, on the other hand, are unlawfully trespassing." She started to say something, but her lip was trembling. She spun around and stormed out. Tyler muttered something about calling the police. Nancy didn't say a word, just glanced at me with an unreadable expression and followed them out. I watched them walk all the way down the driveway. Then I placed the shotgun back in its cabinet. 15 minutes later, I saw flashing lights bouncing off the trees at the edge of the property. The lights hit the trees first, red and blue flashes strobing across the oaks like it was Christmas in hell. 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up the gravel driveway, slow and deliberate, tires crunching like they meant business. The music had been cut. The kids were huddled near the bounce house, some holding half-eaten cupcakes with frosting now forgotten. Parents stood in uneasy clusters. My wife stood by the smoker, arms crossed, her face a hard mask. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I stepped forward before the deputies even got out of their vehicles. I recognized one of them, Deputy Alvarez, tall, lean, and good-natured. The other, a middle-aged guy with a clipboard and mirrored sunglasses, I didn't know. They stepped out with measured calm. No weapons drawn, no shouting, just alert. "Afternoon," I said evenly, hands away from my sides. "I assume this is about Karen." "Mr. Brooks," Alvarez nodded. "We got a call from a Mrs. Karen Ramsey of the Cypress Haven HOA, claiming she and 2 associates were threatened with a firearm during a disturbance." I let that sit in the air a moment, then gestured toward the porch. "I've got the footage queued up. Front yard camera, wide angle, full audio. Want to come take a look?" The mirrored glasses deputy, his nameplate said Harper, eyed me for a second, then gave a single nod. "Let's have a look." Inside, I played them the footage from the moment the HOA trio entered my gate. Everything was clear. Karen stepping through without permission, Tyler puffing himself up like a dollar store bodyguard, me walking inside, then returning calmly with the Mossberg held downward. They heard my words, tone even, nothing threatening, and they saw Karen spin and flee like I'd just summoned the wrath of God. Alvarez let out a low whistle. That's about as clear-cut as it gets. Harper was stone-faced. Weapon wasn't raised. No threats. No aggression. Property clearly marked. Any signs posted? I nodded and pointed out the private property. No trespassing signs nailed to the fence and posted at the gate. Clean, visible, legally compliant. "All right," Harper said finally, folding up his clipboard. "Far as I can tell, you acted within your rights. You're not under any HOA jurisdiction, correct?" "Nope. My land stops a good 500 feet before their boundary line. I chose it that way on purpose." Smart man. Just then, a wail pierced the afternoon. Karen had arrived again, this time in a silver SUV, hair wild, eyes red. She screeched to a stop and flung open her door like she was in a courtroom drama. Tyler and Nancy weren't with her. "That man!" she yelled, stomping toward the porch, pointing a trembling hand at me, waved a shotgun in my face. He could have killed us. Harper stepped in front of her, calm but firm. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage. There was no threat, no brandishing of a weapon under Texas law, and no unlawful conduct by Mr. Brooks." Karen blinked, stunned for a moment. "What do you mean? He had a gun." Isn't that grounds for something? Not when you trespass onto private property uninvited and refuse to leave, Alvarez said, not unkindly. Frankly, you're lucky he didn't file a complaint against you. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. She made a low, strangled sound, like a dying kettle. He traumatized us. You're just going to let him— Yes, Harper interrupted, voice flat. Because this is Texas, because that's the law, and because next time you want to enforce your community standards, you better make damn sure you're still in your community. Karen was shaking now, not from fear, anger. Her pride had taken a direct hit in front of 2 deputies and half the neighborhood. This isn't over, she spat. This isn't over, Daniel. You'll see. I didn't respond, just watched her stalk back to her SUV and slammed the door. She didn't drive away right away, just sat there, probably composing a furious email in all caps to someone who still cared. Harper turned to me and shrugged. Sorry for the disturbance, Mr. Brooks. No apology necessary, I said. Thank you for being professional. They left shortly after, leaving the dust to settle. The mood slowly thawed. Kids went back to their cupcakes. Someone turned the music back on, softer this time. But something had changed. My wife came up beside me. You okay? Yeah, I said. I'm fine. I wasn't. Not really. Karen didn't back down. People like her don't know how to. And the way she looked at me as she drove off, it wasn't over. It started with a knock at the door, a firm, professional rhythm. 3 short raps. Nothing friendly about it. I opened it to find a woman standing there with a badge and a clipboard. Neatly dressed, mid-30s, smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Mr. Daniel Brooks? Yes. I'm with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report regarding unsafe conditions on the premises. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions? The words barely registered. My stomach dropped. I looked over my shoulder. My daughter was in the living room, coloring. My wife, who had just come in from the garden, froze in place, her gloved hands still dusty. What exactly was reported? I asked, doing my best to keep my tone calm. Allegations of unsupervised children, potential exposure to firearms, and alcohol use around minors. A party was mentioned. I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me. We had a birthday party, I said. My daughter's 10th. There were parents here. It was a family event. And yes, there was a firearm, secured, legal, and never pointed at anyone. She nodded like she'd heard it all before, scribbling on her clipboard. I'll still need to take a look around. Speak to your wife and your daughter. Just protocol. And so she did. Walked through our house like she was inspecting a crime scene. My daughter didn't understand what was happening. My wife was mortified. And me? I felt like someone had just pissed on my front porch and left a business card. The report came back clean, of course. She filed it as unfounded, but that wasn't the point. The damage was done. That night, my daughter asked if someone thought we were bad parents. That one cut deeper than any threat Karen had thrown my way. A week later, I got a notice from the city's building code department. Anonymous complaint. Allegedly, my back deck was an illegal structure without proper permits. I laughed when I opened the envelope. Not because it was funny, because it was insultingly obvious. That deck had been inspected, signed off, and blessed by the damn city 3 years ago. I dug out the paperwork, scanned it, sent it in, and didn't even get an apology. Just a short reply. Complaint closed. Then came the environmental division. Apparently, my daughter's inflatable bounce house had caused permanent damage to protected grassland, which, according to the attached map, was my backyard, complete with dog pee spots and a couple of mole hills. The inspector looked half embarrassed when he showed up. I invited him in, offered him a coffee, and showed him the same stretch of grass where a bunch of 10-year-olds had jumped around for an afternoon. He shook his head. "We get these sometimes," he muttered. "Neighbor vendettas." Cypress Haven? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. At that point, I knew this wasn't just harassment. It was a campaign. Targeted, coordinated, petty, yes, but relentless. And then the email came. It was from a Gmail account with no name, just a string of numbers. The subject line read, "You're not crazy." The message was short. "She's trying to bury you in complaints. They meet twice a week and plan this stuff. She wants you out. Said it on record. Said you make the neighborhood unlivable. I've attached proof. Do what you want with it. Just know you're not alone." There was a PDF attached. I opened it and my jaw clenched. Screenshots of a group email thread titled HOA Enforcement Strategy. Dozens of messages. Karen at the top, signing off like some bureaucratic queen. "He's armed and uncooperative. Dangerous mindset. We need to escalate pressure. If the city won't help, we'll find other ways. We'll make it too uncomfortable for him to stay." There were mentions of calls to CPS, complaints about zoning, noise, even garbage pickup. One message ended with, "He'll fold eventually. Everyone does." And then there was a name I recognized. Nancy. Quiet Nancy, who'd come onto my property with Karen. Her name was on several of the messages, but in one, just one, she responded directly to Karen. "We're crossing lines. He's not even under our jurisdiction. This could blow back hard." Karen's reply, "You're either with us or against us." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Nancy. That meant someone on the inside was cracking. I wrote back to the burner email. "Who are you?" No reply. Not that day. But now I knew. This wasn't just harassment. It was a siege. And someone behind enemy lines had just knocked on my door. The email came again 2 days later. Different address, same tone. "Check your mailbox. Lower left corner, behind the plastic flap. Burn it after reading." It felt like something out of a Cold War novel, but sure enough, tucked behind the loose plastic of our rusty mailbox post was a flash drive in a Ziploc bag. I plugged it into a spare laptop I kept offline. What I found was no less than a digital bloodbath. The drive held over 200 files, email logs, PDFs of complaint forms, internal HOA memos. Many were signed by Karen herself. Others were from concerned residents, all using identical language. Patterns emerged, timelines, coordinated attacks launched from a committee that wasn't just overstepping boundaries, they were steamrolling the law. There were even calendar invites. Tuesday, 6:30 p.m., Enforcement Strategy Meeting, Code, Quiet, Utopia. I almost laughed. It sounded like the name of a cult. I had names, timestamps, and in one document, an Excel spreadsheet. Something that turned my stomach. Non-compliant homes near border. Mine was at the top. A red cell next to it said, "Noise, firearm, problem attitude." This wasn't about my daughter's birthday. It never was. I reached out to my attorney, Sandra Coles. She was lean, sharp, and had the kind of voice that made bureaucrats nervous. Former prosecutor, now civil litigator. We'd crossed paths back when I wore a badge, and I knew she didn't take clients she couldn't gut a courtroom for. Sandra took one look at the evidence and said, "They screwed up. Big." We started drafting a formal complaint to the county prosecutor's office, criminal trespass, harassment, conspiracy to abuse administrative process. Then a civil lawsuit, defamation, emotional distress, invasion of privacy, damages related to false reporting and abuse of municipal systems. Sandra's team pulled digital footprints from the submitted complaints. IP addresses? Multiple pings came directly from the HOA office Wi-Fi. They didn't even try to hide it. That same week, I received another email. No burner this time, straight from Nancy. "It's me. I can't stand what she's doing. I didn't sign up for this. I'll help. But I need your word. My name stays out of court." We arranged a phone call. No recordings. No lawyer present. Just voices. Nancy sounded tired. Not broken. Just done. She told me everything. Karen had turned the HOA into her private fiefdom. Tyler was her enforcer. Anyone who questioned her got pushed out, fined into silence, or shamed at monthly meetings. "She thinks she's saving the neighborhood," Nancy said. "But really, she just wants everyone to submit. And when you didn't flinch, when you showed up with that shotgun, she saw it as war." Nancy forwarded more files. Meeting recordings. Notes. An incident report Karen had written up describing me as armed, unstable, and a community threat. She'd sent it not just to police, but to local media contacts. My lawsuit gained traction fast. Word got out. A small local blog picked it up, then a regional outlet. The headline, "Private Property Owner Sues HOA Over Campaign of Harassment." The comments were gold. HOA overreach is the new plague. Finally, someone's standing up to these clipboard tyrants. Team Daniel. That man deserves a statue. It wasn't just noise. Other homeowners started reaching out, some who'd been targeted too. A couple who lived 2 blocks into Cypress Haven had their flower beds cited as aggressively vibrant. Another had been fined for a porch swing that invited loitering. Karen had made enemies, and just like that, the attacks stopped. No more mail, no more fake complaints. CPS didn't show. My inbox was quiet. For the first time in weeks, I slept 8 hours straight. My wife smiled again. My daughter played outside without watching the gate like a scared rabbit. Nancy sent one more message. She's rattled, gone silent. Probably planning her next move. But if you hit now, she won't recover. We were already filing the paperwork to subpoena HOA financials. Sandra was licking her chops, especially after discovering Cypress Haven had been using resident dues to cover outreach operations, aka stalking people who didn't follow Karen's personal vision of suburban bliss. Everything was falling into place. Then Karen disappeared. 3 weeks. No public meetings. No new complaints. No emails. HOA went dark. Sandra raised an eyebrow. Could be she's cutting a deal, or packing her bags. I allowed myself to hope. Maybe we'd won. Maybe the lawsuit, the press, the exposure, it was enough to crush her crusade. But hope's a tricky thing, especially when you forget who you're dealing with. I should have known it was too quiet. The peace didn't feel earned. It felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. Still, I let myself believe. We grilled on the weekends. My daughter rode her bike in loops around the property. My wife started planning a family trip for the fall, like normal people with normal problems. Then, one Tuesday morning, just before 9, a white SUV pulled up to the gate. No markings, no sirens. A stocky man in a cheap suit stepped out holding a thick folder and a clipboard. Behind him, a younger woman with a body cam strapped to her vest and a notepad in hand. They didn't ring the bell. They walked straight up the driveway like it belonged to them. "Mr. Brooks," the man called out. I stepped onto the porch. "Who's asking?" "Marshal George Klinger, private enforcement agent. acting on authority of the Cypress Haven Property Oversight Council. He flashed a laminated ID I could have made at Kinko's. I'm serving you notice of enforcement under Municipal Order 8B. This property is in violation of community land use agreements and is subject to immediate seizure. You have 72 hours to vacate. I stared at him. Then I laughed. I'm sorry. Did you say seizure? You do realize I don't fall under your HOA, right? Not even remotely. He didn't flinch. Sir, you've been formally incorporated into the Extended Compliance Zone via Special Easement Annex filed last month. Paperwork's in the packet. He handed me a thick manila envelope. I opened it and immediately saw something that didn't sit right. A document with my name, an address, and a signature that was almost mine. Almost. But I don't loop my K like that. Never have. Behind it was a map, marked in red, with the words Expansion Zone, HOA Authorized Perimeter Compliance Mandate. And smack in the center of that red blob, my house. You forged this, I said. We're just here to enforce it, he replied. Then go get a county sheriff, I said, stepping forward. Because until I see an actual court order signed by a real judge, the next person who walks onto this property without cause is leaving in a bag. His eyes narrowed. Threatening an officer of civil compliance? No, warning a trespasser. The woman behind him shifted uncomfortably. He muttered something under his breath, turned around, and left. Not a word of protest, just retreated, dropped his little performance. I called Sandra immediately. 10 minutes later, we were at her office, scanning the documents under a forensic light. Every one of these signatures is fake, she confirmed, and these aren't legal forms. They mimic government templates, but badly. This is criminal, Daniel. Karen? Oh, yeah. This has her fingerprints all over it. That afternoon, Sandra filed an emergency injunction with the county. We also filed a criminal complaint for forgery, impersonating a government officer, attempted fraudulent seizure of property, and conspiracy to defraud a private citizen. The judge granted a restraining order against any enforcement action by anyone representing Cypress Haven. The next day, the sheriff's office confirmed. The entire annexation attempt was fabricated. No public hearing, no city approval, no signatures from zoning or planning departments. It was all a smokescreen. But the most jaw-dropping piece came next. The data for the forged annexation documents? The files originated from inside the HOA server. Metadata showed the creator, Nancy Halpern. I stared at the screen for a long time, not quite believing it. She hadn't just been feeding me intel. She'd been orchestrating her own coup. I confronted her via email. You lied to me. You played both sides, she replied an hour later. Karen was dangerous, unpredictable. I helped you weaken her. That part was real. But the HOA needed a new vision. One that knows how to push quietly, not violently. You could have worked with me. You still can. I didn't answer. But Sandra did. She filed a motion to include Nancy as a named co-defendant in the civil suit. And we began gathering evidence to tie her to the forged documents. 2 women, one playing tyrant, the other pretending to be the resistance. Both drunk on control. Both trying to break me under the pretense of community standards. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was at war with a system that had declared itself above the law. By the time we filed the updated civil complaint, we were naming names like we were building a hit list. Karen Ramsey, for trespassing, harassment, defamation, abuse of authority, and criminal conspiracy. Nancy Halpern, for evidence tampering, forgery, obstruction, and malicious manipulation of legal processes. Cypress Haven HOA, for enabling both, failing to operate within legal parameters, and systematic targeting of non-members. Sandra added a final line to the suit that I hadn't thought of, but loved instantly. Request for court-supervised oversight and dissolution of current HOA leadership. We weren't just going after restitution anymore. We were going after the system. The criminal side moved just as fast. The sheriff's department subpoenaed HOA servers. Their tech team pulled logs showing edit histories, file creations, email threads. Nancy had created the forged annexation paperwork on a Tuesday night, 6 hours after attending a planning subcommittee meeting. Karen had approved the final version the next morning. They tried to claim it was a draft. But drafts don't get served by armed goons pretending to be marshals. The prosecutor brought charges within 2 weeks. Karen was booked first. Early morning knock, standard cuffs, perp walk across her porch while a nosy neighbor filmed from the safety of an azalea bush. The video hit Facebook within the hour. My wife and I watched it over pancakes. Nancy came next. She didn't resist. Didn't cry. Just climbed into the back of a county cruiser with the cold composure of someone still convinced she was smarter than the room. The trial date for the civil case was set 6 months out. But the discovery phase? That's where it all unraveled. HOA emails, meeting minutes, audio recordings. One of the most damning pieces came from a whistleblower, a guy named Tim, who used to be on the HOA finance board. He'd resigned quietly a year prior. Now, he walked into our attorney's office with a USB stick and the stiff posture of someone carrying guilt like a tumor. Karen made me help cover funds, he said, to pay off contracted enforcement. We were told not to ask questions. Then she tried to fine me for having a fire pit. He had receipts. Budget reports showing HOA money redirected under vague categories like Community Impact Initiative and Behavioral Oversight Programs, which turned out to be code for harass people until they conform or leave. At the deposition, Karen tried to play the victim, claimed she was acting in defense of community harmony, claimed I had intimidated her with weapons, and that the entire campaign was an unfortunate misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. Sandra calmly slid forward a printed screenshot, Karen's own email. We'll grind him down until he sells. The only thing he respects is force. Karen went pale. Her lawyer asked for a recess. It was denied. Nancy's turn came. She tried the classic pivot, said she went along out of fear, that she never truly wanted this, and tried to stop it from the inside. But Sandra was ready. Why then, she asked, flipping a page, did you approve the creation of this spreadsheet, non-compliant neighbors, removal risk ratings, where you personally labeled Mr. Brooks as a Category 1 agitator and suggested psychological pressure be applied to his family? Nancy didn't answer, just stared straight ahead like she could wait it out. But the court didn't wait. The judge ordered HOA funds frozen pending investigation. A motion was approved to audit Cypress Haven's leadership history. Karen's personal assets were tied up in the process. Nancy was barred from participating in any governance activity pending trial. The civil jury trial was set for the following quarter. And best of all, people started talking. Other residents of Cypress Haven came forward. Families who'd been threatened with fines for wind chimes. Retirees who'd been cited for overly whimsical garden gnomes. A single mother who got harassed for painting her shutters navy instead of approved beige. Karen's regime hadn't just been tyrannical. It had been ridiculous. HOAs exist to maintain property value. Karen used hers to wage psychological warfare. Now she was being buried under the paperwork she loved so much. We weren't done yet, but we were close. The final ruling came on a Wednesday. The courtroom was half full. mostly reporters and Cypress Haven residents who'd started showing up just for the spectacle. I sat with my wife and Sandra at our side. Across from us, Karen, in a gray blazer that looked like it had been ironed by a nervous ghost, and Nancy, calm as a corpse, like she still believed she'd walk out of this untouched. The judge read through the verdict like she was carving it into stone. The court finds the defendants, Karen Ramsey, Nancy Halpern, and the governing body of the Cypress Haven Homeowners Association, liable for the following civil violations: malicious harassment, unlawful trespassing, conspiracy to defraud, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I didn't smile. Not yet, the judge continued. Furthermore, the court recognizes that the aforementioned parties did willfully engage in coordinated efforts to abuse municipal complaint systems and manipulate legal procedures for personal and political purposes. Then came the numbers. The HOA was ordered to pay $480,000 in damages to my family. Karen was personally fined an additional $25,000 for the forged annexation scheme. Nancy? $15,000, plus court fees, and barred from holding any administrative or governance position in any HOA or civic organization for 10 years. But money wasn't what hit hardest. Karen was escorted from the courtroom in cuffs, this time for separate criminal charges related to document forgery and impersonation of a government authority. That case would take months, but her bail was denied on the spot. As she passed by our row, she didn't look at me. I didn't need her to. She'd already lost everything she built. And more importantly, she'd lost the illusion that she could control people beyond her little picket-fenced kingdom. Nancy stood and left on her own. No cuffs, no escort. Just the long walk of someone who'd burned every bridge and had no home left to go back to. Even her former allies in the HOA board had voted to expel her unanimously the week prior. Within a month, Cypress Haven was placed under court-appointed oversight. A third-party manager was assigned to handle all operations, while a full audit was conducted. Elections were frozen. Fines suspended. The petty tyranny, for now, was over. The emails stopped. The calls ended. The mailbox was empty of threats, warnings, or fake notices. And I slept. Really slept. No tension in the jaw. No twitch at every knock on the door. Life didn't just return to normal. It felt earned now. We used part of the compensation to put in a new deck. A big one. With an outdoor fireplace, a covered grilling station, and space for 20 guests. Then we put up cameras. Lots of them. And one metal sign right at the front gate. Private property. Not HOA compliant. Gladly. And then came the day, exactly 1 year later, when my daughter turned 11. The bounce house was back. The tables were back. My wife made too much lemonade. I made too many ribs. Kids ran wild again, this time without looking over their shoulders. Just before the guests arrived, my daughter tugged on my sleeve and pointed at a little wooden sign she'd painted in bright purple and green letters. She'd hammered it right under the gate sign, just her size. It read, "If you're not invited, turn around while we're still being nice." I couldn't have said it better myself.